Kings are falling every day, and kings are rising just the same.
Happy Hump Day and welcome to Kings with Kosine right here on Fox Soul. With so much heaviness in the world today, we're going to look to art to help elevate us from these dark spaces and into the marvelous light. Before I forget, we have a special announcement at the end of the show, so you'll definitely want to stay tuned for it. I am your host, Marcos Enrique Palacios, aka Kosine. And as most of you know, I stay representing Panama. I'm Panamanian. And in my house growing up, we didn't really have no Rembrandts or Picassos. We had molas. The mola is a handmade textile and traditional design unique to the Guna people, an indigenous tribe from Panama and parts of Colombia. Last year, people around the world became aware of molas when Nike stole the design and was put on blast by the Guna people for trademark infringement. To add insult to injury, Nike planned the whole release around the Puerto Rican Day Parade as if they were unaware that Puerto Rico and Panama are not the same country. Nike ended up canceling the release of the show, which highlights the importance of art in capturing our culture. So that's what we're talking about today, art and culture. Who decides what's beautiful? Who determines the value of a piece? Why is it so difficult for Black artists to break the glass ceiling in this industry? And why we all should become collectors. We got a lot of ground to cover today. So let me get into this iconic panel. First, we have a world-renowned, I kind of feel like a basketball announcer right now. First, we have a world-renowned conceptual artist whose work has been exhibited in places like the Guggenheim, the Whitney Museum, Sundance Film Festival, the Tribeca Film Institute, and the Goodman Gallery in South Africa. This NYU graduate has given lectures at Yale and Princeton and has a permanent installation at the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Birmingham. Hank Willis Thomas, how you feeling today this evening?
Feeling great. So great to be here with everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, brother. Our next guest is a visual artist whose work has been featured in the New York Times, Huffington Post, and Vogue. He's exhibited at Art Basel and has had his work featured in television shows like Black AF. Help me welcome Knowledge Bennett to the panel. Knowledge, what's good, church?
Peace, everybody. Doing good, man. Happy to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This next brother not only represents incredible talent like Micheline Thomas, but he's also an art collector. He has a robust art collection, which includes a deep concentration of Black artists, ranging from Jack Whitten to MacArthur Binion, Rashid Johnson, Charles Gaines, and more. And I have questions for this brother this evening. I want to know if my paper is even long enough to start investing. The man with the answers we need is George Wells. How you doing, brother?
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me, Cos.
I might need a loan, George, but we'll get into that later on in the show. And finally, there's an NBA Hall of Famer on this show, an alumni of the greatest college basketball program in the world, Craig, the Duke Blue Devils. This brother sponsored a nearly 3-year tour of his personal African-American art collection because he wanted to bring attention to this part of pop culture that has gone unrecognized for way too long. Help me welcome the co-owner of the Atlanta Hawks, Mr. Grant Hill.
Yes, all right.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Hey. Oh, thank you. I'm very honored to be in rarefied company here. So thanks for having me.
That's what's up. That's what's up. Well, look, this question is for everybody, and we can start with Grant and Hank. In your opinion, how has art shaped and changed the culture? I'm loving your background already out the gate, Grant, too. You get
Well, I mean, I'll take a stab at that. You know, I think I think capturing the culture and influencing culture has been part of sort of the role that art plays. I feel like, whether you're talking, 50, 80 or 60 years ago or present day, art reflects ultimately the culture, and it captures the written but also the unwritten. And for me, I studied history in school, and particularly the Harlem Renaissance and that time period. A lot of that, which I didn't learn about prior to going to Duke, as you mentioned, and so learning about that, and then now sort of understanding that a lot of this art is really, it's history. It's history on canvas, and a lot of that history is being told and being shared, even when we as Black folk aren't necessarily being heard. And I think that's been consistent over many, many years. So I like to say, art is like an essay of the past and also of the present. So the ability to sort of reflect on what's happening right now, through the eyes of a Hank or a knowledge. And even though it's real, it's what's happening, it may not necessarily be mainstream, but it's the ability to sort of capture that moment. And so I think that role, as particularly as a history that's been marginalized, and to be able to tell that story is something that's very important.
Hank, jump in there.
Yeah, well, I think there is no civilization without art, right? That's all that we know about past civilizations really is through their art and architecture. I don't know if you can have a culture without art, so everything that we do, whether it be the food, whether it be the music, the dance, the objects we make, the ones we sit on, the way we speak, the way we talk, the way we relate to each other, it's all performance and art. And I think one of the things that I've been more waking up to is the reality that it's only been in recent Western culture that we've been trained out of seeing all ourselves as artists, whereas before, everyone made quilts, everyone wove baskets, everyone made tools, everyone was a singer and a dancer. And that was just part of your spiritual connection, your role as a member of society.
Yeah, that's powerful that you say that, just because like you hear people say, it's like you picking a side, either you're a business or you're a creative, you know what I mean? But there's an essence where we all had that creative side. I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's powerful.
No, I think the sooner we get back to recognizing that we have these multiple capacities, the better off we are as a society. And that's one of the things that I think is so inspiring about Grant's collecting, and the way that he's always, as long as I've been an artist, been enthusiastic not only about contemporary art but also looking back at generations, because that was a connection to our past that we didn't really even know about as far as popular culture was concerned. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's powerful right there. Just even thinking about being made in the image of the creator. We're all creators. I love that. When I try to remember the first time when I really paid attention to art outside of my crib, I think about the Cosby Show. And they always showcased art on the walls at the Huxtable's house. The bright color ones were by an artist named Barnett Honeywood. Then there was the one that Mrs. Huxtable won at an auction for $11,000, right? This was so important because they wrote the storyline about the painting being done by her Uncle Ellis and being sold by her grandmother, who got sick and needed the money for bills. And what's so telling about the story is that in real life, the most the artist Ellis Wilson actually got off the painting was $300. So knowledge, I want to start with you. What did it mean for you in your career to be featured by Kenya Barris in his TV show, Black AF? Because that's a Cosby Show moment for somebody coming up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's funny you say that. Well, first of all, shout out to Kenya Barris and his genius, for even giving me the opportunity and providing a platform for, myself and other artists who I was, on that platform representing as well, because I feel as though a win for any artist is a win for all artists, right? But it's speaking about that being somebody's Cosby Show moment. Just this evening, I was sent an image, a photo through Instagram DM of a baby that was born today. No, the baby was born actually on the 23rd, who was named after me after the parents having watched that show. And they was looking for a name, to name the child. And, and when they watched the show, my name, Kenya mentioned my name. This is the Knowledge Bennett piece that I was looking for and what have you. And the mother said to the husband, that's the name. That's what we're going to name our child, So she reached out to me maybe a couple of months ago, just telling me this, right? Warning me, and I was, of course, taken back, right? Extremely humbled by that, such a gesture. And I had a long conversation back and forth with the mother, and with the father indirectly through the mother, and just explaining, one, how humbled I am, I'm saying, how much of a privilege that is to have someone who you don't know, who you're not connected to physically, like biologically, what have you, somebody that's akin to you, having the opportunity to have that type of impact on somebody, it just, it blew my mind. Because even, my son is my namesake as well, but to have somebody else name their son after me, that was a big thing. So that definitely was one of those, as you just mentioned, Cosby Show moments, because for me, having, let's say, being formally introduced to art through television, for me, it happened with that Cosby Show episode, learning who that artist was, understanding the way in which, the television characters, Claire and Heathcliff, how they really wanted that piece. And they went to the auction and really was savvy about the way in which they acquired that work, and they refused to walk out of there losing, having lost, lost. So that was probably the first time that many young Black Americans, witnessed something like that. This full circle moment come back and realize that, Kenya giving me that opportunity and me going on there, doing what I did had a similar impact, onto this generation. So now to be a young man growing up with my name, would always have that connection and that story. So
that's heavy. That's heavy. Yeah. George, give me a art and pop culture moment that impacted you. I'm not expecting you to say exactly what Knowledge said, because that's like him pressing the stunt button. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I think it would be hard to compete with that story, but honestly, my road to art was kind of by happenstance. I run a consulting firm that mostly specializes in tech startups, and I was working with a family that is behind Lehman Maupin, one of the top international art galleries. And so they needed an interim CFO for a couple of years to help them kind of fix the financial infrastructure for the company. And it was through that experience that I really started getting involved and sort of loving art. The first piece that really spoke to me personally was the work by Hank Willis Thomas, who at that time was represented by the gallery. And then I started slowly getting into more and more of their program and more of their art. And then I found myself, I bought my first Nari Award painting, and then I started living with that. And then it snowballed because it really changed my outlook on life. And of course, I had the Cosby experience and watched Black AF and stuff like that. But as someone who studied, finance and accounting at Morehouse, it was pretty vocational. It kind of was by happenstance, but I will say that it definitely has changed my life in almost every way. Like even how I see the sunrise or the sunset.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's crazy. I almost wanted to punch one of the homies because I thought he was being a smart ass, because I was like, yo, give me some. He's a video director. And I was like, you're like, talk to me about your inspiration. And he was like, everything is inspiration. Life is inspiration. You know what I mean? And so like, even when you just said the sunrise, it's exactly that. There's an iconic piece that we associate with the TV show Good Times, Sugar Shack by Ernie Barnes. And the original was purchased by Eddie Murphy and is said to be on display at his home. George, you can jump back in, or Grant, and thinking about the artists and your roles as investors or collectors, what's the best strategy for artists to get their work sold, and how do they increase the value of their work?
Go ahead, George. I'm sorry.
No, you please. You're great.
Go ahead. Jump in.
Yeah, stay in it, George. Stay in it. Stay in it. Then we'll go
Okay.
to Greg.
Okay. I guess I'll go first. Honestly, I think just being consistently putting out good and strong work is probably the most important. In my opinion, the second most important is talking about your practice in a very specific way that resonates with all the members of the art ecosystem, because it's not really the artist who, if you're buying a more established artist, it's not really the artist who's selling their work directly, it's the galleries. And the galleries are almost like the agents or the evangelists for artists, telling their stories to all the other members of the art ecosystem, whether that's museum curators, press, social media. I think it's been an equal, kind of a equalizer of sorts, because you can kind of, skip or circumvent the traditional gallery system to at least become known. But I think just consistency in work and telling your story, and then if you can, find the best gallery that you can join. And I don't mean the best from a standpoint of like the most prestigious, but one that motivates you and you connect with the owners and you're motivated to produce your greatest work. And then at that point, you kind of wait to be discovered. I also think the only other thing that's worth pointing out is I wouldn't try to like sell, bargain basement sell your work, because if you end up selling a lot of your work to people who can't afford to hold the work, then it could end up, once you start to have that momentum and stardom, it can kind of backfire, because then everyone's going to be selling your work at auction and you could kind of fizzle out. The patience and consistency and for lack of a word, branding. Yeah.
Graham, what you got?
Yeah. No, I mean, I thought George said it great there. I think, obviously trying and working to become a part of the art community, as George illustrated. I do think artists, and I don't, obviously Knowledge and Hank, I mean, they could probably speak to this better than I can, but I think artists want to make money. But I also feel that creativity is not necessarily inspired by commercialism. And I don't think the idea of, I don't think artists necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like artists necessarily want to prostitute themselves for commercialism. Right. I do think that people are ultimately drawn to creativity. And so if you can master your creativity, if you can, I'm married to an artist, a different medium, but she is very particular about her creativity. And she has her career, and that's totally separate and independent of this discussion. But, I get to sort of see that the seriousness that she applies, much like I'm sure you as well, everybody here, with maybe the exception, no offense, George, you and I, although I might be the least creative of the bunch, but I think people are drawn to that. And so, I think if you focus on the creativity and then immerse yourself within the art community as best you can, I think ultimately the creativity, will prevail. And so I'm just a big believer in that. And
I love that.
I
love that. We got to run the break real quick, but when we come back, I want to just stay in creativity for real quick. Hank and Knowledge, I want y'all to weigh in on that, and then we'll talk some more numbers. Right back, Kings with Kosine on Fox Soul.
I like sunshine. There.
Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why did the girl ask the mushroom to dance? Because he was a fun guy. What do you call a pig that knows karate? Pork chop.
Why was the basketball court all wet?
Why?
Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Can I tell you another one? So how does a tissue dance? Put a little boogie on it.
What's Beethoven's favorite fruit? Banana. What is a boxer's favorite drink? Fruit punch.
I know what you're thinking. I need a job.
Well, I've been there.
I've been there.
But you gotta keep going.
You just need the right skills. Find an apprenticeship.
I found a course online.
You can do this.
You will find something.
You will find something new.
Hey, young world, the world is yours. Hey, young world, the world is yours. Young world, the world is yours. Young world, this right here.
This is Slick Rick. From protests to the polls, get registered. Make your plan to vote early. Don't wait. Election day is November the 3rd. Peace.
Don't be a fool like those that don't go to school. Get ahead and accomplish things. You'll see the wonder and the joy life brings.
Joy and pain. I like sunshine and rain.
Welcome back to Kings with Kosine right here on Fox Soul. And I just want to stay in the spirit of creativity because, you know, writer's block is a real thing. Also, you know, standing out and sometimes what could be a saturated business. Hank, I want to jump to you and then Knowledge, you can weigh in on this. Talk to me about creativity and how you, you know, avoid writer's block and how you able to just to stand out amongst your peers.
I'm sure you probably have a better answer than I do. I think in the music industry, it's even more competitive in many ways. And there's the level of attention that you all have to pay. Look at all the knobs and switches behind you.
No, you know, it's crazy. I'm definitely, I see so many parallels with art and music. That's why I'm glad Grant even mentioned his wife, because I'm getting gems that I'm gonna take right over into this other studio as soon as this show is over with. So yeah, no, go ahead. You got it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know about you. I think when we feel the urge to create, it's almost like, you know, it's like, it's the beat of life. You know, my heart starts to beat. I can't sleep. My I have to, my energy gets up and I feel like that's just the spirit inside of us. That is like, that recognizes that our survival or our awakeness, our aliveness is connected to our ability to create. So as you said, you know, it's it's the creator within us. And I don't know, I think Grant articulated it so well that we are not as excited or interested in prostituting ourselves for commercialism. And in some ways, that can be a writer's block when you realize that, you know, people just want you to perform a certain type of, you know, of making, of being an artist or whatever, and that it doesn't feel authentic to you in that moment. To me, I think that's the hardest thing for me, when I realize that I might be, you know, kind of playing the same song or recycling a beat that in a way that's not necessarily inspiring to me. And in those moments, I feel like I have to really reevaluate everything. And there are, of course, moments when my peers will make something brilliant, like the Gates, or that I'm like, oh, I wanted to do that. I was thinking about that. Now I have to like wait 5 years and think about, or Knowledge, like, where do I, okay, I was almost there. And
right. That's definitely when I'm in the car driving and you hear one of the homies and you like, man, this song is crazy. Who did this? And then you find out one of your homies is the one that produced it. Oh man, Knowledge, jump in on creativity, man.
I mean, I think it's just a matter of remaining true to yourself, right? Like Hank just mentioned, you know, we get these urges, you know, to create an idea, like the light bulb goes off in our head, and that'll lead us into our studio. It may maybe lead us just into our head for a set period of time, conceptualizing these ideas, but then at some point we arrive in the studio to actualize them and then bring them to the people. But I think it's just really a matter of, you know, remaining true to who you are, being sincere, keeping your message, you know, authentic, you know, to yourself, right? And something else that Hank just mentioned was, you know, having the courage to make that shift, maybe aesthetically, right? Maybe it may be a different look aesthetically. Like I went through that because I had a certain experience within my life I had 3 experiences, right? I experienced, you know, 3 major losses in my life, family-wise, in 2018. which prompted me to shift my approach to the canvas, where it didn't look anything like what I was making up until that point, right? But it was something that I had to put out there into the universe, and it was actually that body of work that, you know, landed me that spot on Black AF. It was also that body of work that landed me an exhibition, you know, a huge solo exhibition up at Western Washington University early in the year, pre-COVID. And it's also that body of work that's, you know, has me a part of the Smithsonian's traveling exhibition right now titled Men of Change. So and up until that point, I thought I figured it out. I figured out, well, this is what I want to do. This is my aesthetic. I'm gonna stay on brand, and I'm gonna just keep creating, but producing something that wasn't too different than what I was already making, because sometimes you can lose your audience that way. But having such an experience like I did in 2018 with all of that loss, that just kind of took over that logic, right? It took over that idea. Here's the strategy. This is what we're going to stick with, and keep working at that and just grow that. And then by doing that, by allowing myself to be free, right? To break that freedom, you know what I mean? Creatively, it opened doors that, you know, probably wouldn't have opened otherwise. So,
No, that just hit me in the chest. Because when I even think about the song KINGZ that I was telling you guys before, that I released earlier this year, that's the opening to this show. You know, my father passed last year, and that song is dedicated to him. And I definitely don't get those lyrics, you know, without that type of trauma in my life. So that super resonates with me. So just, you know, moving back into the business of this, the global art market, according to Statista, was valued at over $67 billion US in 2018, with the volume of global art sales reaching approximately 40 million transactions. George, you can jump in on this. How in the world are we as Black people not getting a piece of this pie?
You know, I think it's a very good question. I think if you were asking that question 10 years ago, I think it would be a much starker message. I think the number of Black artists that are part of major gallery programs was probably, you could probably count on one hand or maybe two. I think that's changed a lot over the last, say, 5 to 10 years, you know, since 10 years ago. But I think there's still a lot more work to do. I think that while Black art has actually really, really gained momentum, like artists like Hank and McLean and MacArthur and Neri have, you know, if you look at the last 5 years, of course, their prices have increased substantially. But part of it that I kind of, you know, when I go to art fairs or when I was working and running an international gallery, there's just so few Black collectors. So it's almost like fetish-like in nature. It felt like they're just buying Black art for pure speculation, which is honestly, in some parts, part of the hype, right? You have to have that momentum. The prominent collectors who happen to mostly be white. Of course, we have Grant Hill and a handful of other prominent Black collectors, but there's not a ton of Black collectors. So I think starting to educate more people on what it means to start investing in contemporary art. I don't like to call it investing. It's kind of more collecting. Even some of my friends from Morehouse or from my years on Wall Street who have money, they still don't buy, you know, blue chip art or art. A lot of people don't even know like who Hank Willis is or who Knowledge is, who are these household names, even people that can't afford it. So part of it is kind of like breaking that and shattering that ceiling of just awareness, because I don't think many Blacks, even affluent Blacks, know about how the contemporary art world has outperformed the S&P for the last 30 years or 40 years. They don't know that most billionaires like Stephen A. Cohen, they have 20% of their money in art, right? Because they see it as almost like an asset class. So I think it's increasing the awareness, but I think there's so much work that still has to be done. I think the Black Lives Matter movement has kind of changed the discourse and the conversation a bit. And, you know, I'm hopeful that we keep that going, because I think museum world, gallery world are being held more accountable to making sure that they have a program and exhibitions that reflect the society in which we live. So there's some inklings of hope, but I think we just have to do more on the awareness front.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm starting my collection with y'all two brothers that are here, Hank, Knowledge, you know what I mean? And it's crazy. One of my Chicago brothers, like Hebrew Brentley, you know what I mean? Like that's the homie. And it's like I'll mention him to people and they like, bro, you know him? You know what I'm saying? And I just remember pulling up to his art space in Chicago years ago and just leaving there so inspired. You know what I mean? Let's see. Grant, you want to jump in on just like how to really get started? You know what I'm saying? Like collecting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I like what George said there about, you know, not necessarily. I mean, it is an investment, but not approaching it as such. You know, I typically try to buy what, you know, or acquire what, you know, what speaks to me, what I like, you know, regardless of the price point. And you know, I've recently bought pieces that are, you know, not to put my business in the street, but that are, you know, of a certain price point that are pretty high, but also, you know, emerging artists who are more affordable. And so I think if the question is you're asking sort of if people are interested or curious about becoming collectors, I think sometimes you can be intimidated by you know, some of the art that you read about in the sales and, you know, Sotheby's and Christie's and things of that nature. But, you know, I think the reality is there's great art everywhere and there's great Black art. And I agree that the support of Black art is certainly changing in recent years. And, you know, it's a little bit like historically, I mean, most things Black are marginalized and undervalued historically. And I think of like Ralph Ellison and The Invisible Man. And so, you know, you think of people like Bearden and Catlett and some of the old masters and, you know, great art that was, to me, is you know, the same quality as, you know, the Renaissance, if you will, but weren't appreciated. It was a genre that wasn't appreciated. But I think a lot is changing. I think, you know, having Obama in office, I think sort of the acceptance of Black culture overall and how that's become more mainstream. And certainly Black art, you know, people like Hank and Knowledge and others, you're starting to see people appreciate and value that art. But I do think it's important that we, you know, we continue to support our own. And I'm mindful, you know, I have a lot of Beardens and Romare Bearden, and I loaned. He had a retrospective at the National Gallery of Art in early 2000, and so I loaned two of mine to the exhibit. And at the time, that was, you know, I mean, that was of course a big show. And I remember there was a reception before opening night, and all the collectors who had donated, and I was the only Black collector that was there. And this is sort of, you know, this was a godfather of you know, I like to say the godfather of African-American art. And so I think it's imperative that, you know, we just continue to support, and there's great art out there at every price point. So I really don't believe one should be intimidated, but you should educate yourself. You should visit galleries, museums, you know, find out what speaks to you. And, you know, and then, you know, be inclined to want to support and you know, and you know, these artists by acquiring it. But you know, I do think for me, art is personal. I've never really looked at it as a commodity or as an investment. You know, I try to support art, acquire art that for whatever reason has a connection, speaks to me, inspires me, provokes me in some form or fashion. And you know, if you know, reality is though, as I say that, as you buy good art over time, you know, it can become a pretty solid investment. Not that you necessarily acquire art for that reason. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, copy that. I like the person. I mean, like, it's crazy because this is almost like art that speaks. I'm looking at art almost like your clothes. You know what I'm saying? When you say personal, like it jumps out. You know what? You know, I see myself in that. I'm gonna pivot real quick and say, looking at how art shows up in the culture. For some people, Beyonce's video from The Love was the first time that many of them have ever seen art in that way, right? To younger kids, her video would be like a Cosby show, you know, to that generation. Fine art shows up in so many different mediums. When we're looking at music videos, that's really like just putting motion to a painting. And a huge shout out to Lil Kim and Misa, who really kind of crafted a lot of the creativity that we see today in hip hop culture, from Nicki to Lil Yachty to Cardi. And speaking of Cardi, right, one of the things I love the most about Cardi B is how creative she is with her videos. You know what I mean? And Money, she actually brings a museum to life. Knowledge, you can jump in here real quick. What has been your favorite non-traditional place to see or hear art?
Favorite non-traditional? I mean, when I think of it, I think of three places in particular, three restaurants actually in particular, as it pertains to my work anyway. Some collectors purchased my work years back from Art Basel in Miami, and next thing I know, I'm getting these, you know, people at you on Instagram, and the works ended up in some restaurant in Detroit, right? 4 of the paintings ended up in the Detroit. 4 of the works from my Cojones series ended up in Detroit. Another 2 of them ended up at a high-end restaurant in San Fran. And then another one of them ended up in a restaurant in the Dominican Republic, right? So for me, that was like, these was works that I would never imagine would hang on the walls in these, you know, fine dining establishments, because it's one of my most, you know, tongue-in-cheek bodies of work, right? Aesthetically. You know what I mean? Conceptually, there's something else going on there, but aesthetically, these are my most probably tongue-in-cheek. And for them to actually, you know, hang on the walls above people as they sit there and they eat their meals, you know, it kind of like blew my mind that these collectors even had that in mind, because they never mentioned that to me when they was acquiring the works back then. So, I mean,
that's dope. That's
for me,
dope.
it's a non-traditional place to, I mean, we often see decorative art inside, you know, restaurants and commercial spaces like that. But for someone to acquire work and then actually bring it to the public, that's what I'm most attracted to when a collector acquires my work, is somebody who's willing to share the work. Because that's what I think art is really all about. You know, I think an artist is someone who has something to say and has figured out a way to say it, whether it's through music, fashion, film, fine art, you know, painting or what have you. But the fact that once you say it and you have a platform to say it on and it's shared with other people, for me, that's when it becomes real. People ask me the question, when is a painting finished, you know, or complete? And I say, you know, once it's shared, once it's shared with the public, then it becomes all that, you know what I'm saying, all the more real for me, you know, because then there's a connection being made. And that's what I think art is here for, right? To connect us to one another.
Mm-hmm. Hank, jump in on that. One of the most like non-traditional places that you've seen, heard art.
I think the most non-traditional place that, well, I think in Trinidad, they could call it traditional, but at Trinidad Carnival, especially on Carnival Tuesday, you see these incredible, you know, floats and sculptures that people make for their bodies. You know, I'm sure in Panama, there's similar things where you just see this craft work and these people are moving with this stuff on them and look like a huge boat on top of someone's head. And, you know, and you can tell that they've spent the whole year building it. You know, it happens in Mardi Gras with the Indians, and the fact that there's certain people who take all of their free time to develop these incredible structures that fit their body perfectly for one day to go out and celebrate is something that I am awed by, you know, that I really am inspired by. And then I go often to Burning Man in the middle of the desert, and you see also these crazy things that people, again, spend their whole year making. And it may not be like high art as we call it, but the fact that you can go somewhere where there's no electricity normally, and there's, you know, tornadoes and crazy storms and sand, and people build this beautiful stuff just to see if they can do it. It's like a mandala, you know, in many Eastern culture, where you just make something because the process of making is actually the work of art, the product is ephemera. And I think so for me, what I'm most excited about as I move forward is continuing to try to make work in the public space. So I have a 28-foot Afro pick that's outside the Human Rights Campaign in DC, just a few blocks from the White House. And then I have work up, as you mentioned, at the Equal Justice Initiative's National Memorial for Peace and Justice. And I realized that public space is probably one of the most exciting places for any artist to work, because there's a small chance that, you know, people 1,000 years from now might be walking around and come across something that you made and understand a little bit about our culture. And I'd rather it be more art and less McDonald's.
Yeah. There you go. Get in it.
I hope that's an inspiration for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's heavy. You just literally took me back to my childhood, thinking I was about to go outside and play basketball with the homies, and my mom reminding me about the Afro-Latino parades happening in Chicago, and how I got to put on my panabrisa, my straw hat, my shakara over the top. And I'm like, Mama, don't do this to me. But I was going to get that culture. You know what I mean? We got to run a break. When we come back, we're going to take a question from the audience who is wondering, you know, what makes a piece of art a collectible. More with Kings with Kosine right here on Fox Soul.
Spending time outdoors has never felt more valuable. Whether it's exploring nature or relaxing in your yard, let's do it responsibly. Before going out, check for closures and fire restrictions. Practice social distancing, even when outside and on the trail. Back at home, if burning yard debris, keep your pile small. And no matter where you are, be sure to properly extinguish any outdoor fire. Drown, stir, drown, feel. We're all in this together. Help keep our safe places safe.
Anytime they're playing music downstairs, it's loud. I go downstairs, see what they're doing, see what music they're doing, see what they're dancing to. I go play piano downstairs, they come get involved. Leah has a drum set beside it, banging that. Any music, that's what they do.
Here's to the things that can keep us safe. Those we use all the time with hardly a thought. Those that are silently standing by to save our lives. And now, those that we carry with us everywhere we go. Many mobile devices will now bring you wireless emergency alerts, real-time information directly from local sources you know and trust. With the unique sound and vibration, you'll be in the know wherever you are.
Tonight we're having our pajama party, and some of us don't look like we're quite in pajamas.
Fox Soul presents Chatter.
She happens to be in green. I didn't want to say her name. And then the other one has on jean pajamas.
This is a onesie. 5 women of faith, keeping it real.
Dr. Jewel, you're a little naked for the sake.
Every Thursday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific.
You're trying to get our ratings up.
Stream it live.
Welcome back to Kings with Kosine right here on Fox Soul. And we have a question from JB. He says, what makes a piece of art a collectible? George Grant, I don't know who wants to answer it, but what makes art a collectible? Inquiring minds want to know.
I'll take a stab at it. I think, honestly, it's a case of beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like, do you want to live with this work of art for the rest of your life? And does it kind of elevate your life in some kind of special way? I think the more kind of financial answer is the artist established? Are they working with a major gallery? Do they have any museum shows? What's their momentum? And I think, earlier you were talking a little bit about accessibility, right? And a lot of artists have limited edition works. there's so much. There's like artists whose price range really can range from $1,000 for an edition of 30, right? Where it might be a silkscreen print or a print or something, but it's still a collectible, and those prices start at $1,000, $2,000 range. So I do think that if you have $1,000 to invest in art, just assume that you may not get that $1,000 back. And does it change your life? And if it changes your life, you love living with it, and it motivates you to thrive every day, buy it. But don't depend on flipping it. That's my
Grant, anything on that?
Yeah.
What makes art a collectible?
I mean, I think it's all personal. It's subjective. I think it's a feeling. It's a feeling that that a piece of art, I guess a piece of art sort of makes you feel special, or it's something about it that you're drawn to. I can't even necessarily articulate it, but it's like I'll embarrass him, but I mean, I was lucky enough to have one of Hank's pieces. Actually, the only piece that my wife bought for me, or bought for us, but bought for me to capture, a really important, significant milestone in my career. And I feel like it's an ongoing sort of relationship and conversation with your art, and so you have it prominently displayed. You are fascinated by it. I think sometimes that what was the thought process? What was he thinking? What was going through his head? It's a feeling, and I think it's just like you see a nice piece of clothing or a car or whatever that might be that speaks to you. What I feel may not necessarily speak to someone else. I'll give you a perfect example. Our history is not necessarily a beautiful history, and we have a dark past, and some of the art that we have in our collection is dark, and that my wife doesn't like that. And so that's a source of contention in our household. But I mean, she, and so that unfortunately is in storage, but that's important to me. And so I just think it's really what speaks to you. And like I said, I can go and buy a print or be at a fair somewhere and see a piece of art that obviously is not of the stature of a Knowledge or a Hank, or at least the sort of commercial appeal. But for whatever reason, it resonates with me. And so I think that's the most important. It has to be personal. It has to be something that, as George said, something you're comfortable living with.
I'm thinking when you say personal, and I start thinking about lyrics, I'm thinking about Jay-Z, and that 444 album, man. He dropped so many gems in the album, and I have an extreme affinity to it because one of my mentors, also a brother from Chicago by the name of No ID, produced the entire album. And he basically breaks down for us how he bought a piece of art for $1 million. In a few years, it was worth $8 million, which sounds crazy and unattainable on one hand, but completely doable on the other. When I start counting up how much money I spent on other stuff over the past few years, I could have been getting art. You know what I'm saying? Like, especially when you say a collectible piece and started $1,000 or $2,000. Then on top of that, he's passing these lessons on to his daughter, Blue Ivy, who was famously in a heated competition with Tyler Perry during an art bid a couple years ago. I really feel like it's really about the patrons of art like yourself. So Knowledge, I'm gonna go over to you and say, how do we cultivate more patrons of art in our community?
I think through education. That's one of the, I approach my art career in a very non-traditional way. I've worked with various galleries around the world, who've lent their platform to me to help grow myself, but I was always a very hands-on entrepreneurial type of creative, right? So a big part of that is I actually develop collectors. I'm not always just discovered by a collector. I know people who happen to have money, who was never formally introduced to art, really have no background in it. And I sit down with them and I share, you know what I mean? I share as much information as possible with them. And then they come to develop that addiction, right? Because it does become an addiction. I believe it's a positive one if you manage things properly. But it's an addiction nonetheless. And they come to develop that, right? So these are people who was maybe buying antique cars, you may be collecting real estate, maybe collecting watches, all these things. And I say, listen, you ever thought about art? And I may send some documentaries their way, some articles their way, have some conversations with them. And now all of a sudden they got the bug. So for me,
I need that, but I need that right now. Give me a couple of those documentaries real quick. Start. Give me a little homework.
But I think it's through the sharing of information that allows them to become a more informed consumer as it pertains to collecting work. Because one of the things that, the question you asked in regards to what makes a work a collectible and things of that nature, right? One, I just think it's an element of rarity, right? It has to be some element of rarity, because if there's relatively speaking, if there's 1 million of them like floating around, right, then it's not deemed so much a collectible, right? But if there's very few, I think that's one of the things that first lends itself to a person saying, I want that thing that nobody else has, or it's only a club of 5 of us, right? There's 5 in the world, so I want to be a part of that club of 5, so an element of rarity. But then they have to understand that they become stewards, right, of the work and preservation of the work and adding to the provenance of it, right? Allowing the work to go on loan, like Grant mentioned earlier, right? To have these, to be a part of exhibitions at whether museums or at different universities or even certain public spaces or whatever the case may be, all of that adds to the value of a work of art over time. So being able to share that type of information with people who weren't collectors traditionally when I met them, but they grew to become collectors, I really, I hold that, what I'm saying? Like, I think that's one of the things that I do best is actually grow, not just find them pre-existing.
All right, real quick, we got a question that just came in from the audience. RJ Renee, do any of the guests have any programs for the youth to inspire and guide them in the arts or sports? You know what I mean? But just throwing that out there. Any programs, gentlemen?
So if I could jump back in. So one of the things I'm in the process of doing right now is establishing a foundation, right? Because once again, I came to art in a very non-traditional way, and I want to be able to offer that same experience to other young, would-be creatives if ever given the opportunity. You know what I mean? The schools that I attended growing up, art wasn't a thing, right? It was really just about athletics. You know what I mean? So that's what I did. I spent my time playing football, running track, you know what I mean? Being an athlete, being a student athlete, you know what I mean? But it wasn't until I was 30 years old that I really truly became formally introduced to the world of art, and just like the addiction that grows of being a collector, the same thing with being a creative, because I've always had something to say, but I didn't find a medium that I wanted to express myself in, until that age, right? So when I got 30, I started, I picked up a camera, I started studying first photography, and then I started, practicing photography in various different forms, and then that trickled over to me actually doing the silkscreen painting and then just painting in general. And it's something that I fell in love with, and it changed my life, forever. It's taken me places that, I've always been an entrepreneur. So it wasn't that I didn't have access to money, right? I had the money, but it opened me up and taken me places that my money never took me before, right? So it was this art that gave me an inside look to a world that I didn't even know, really know existed. You know what I mean? So I want to be able to offer that thing to young to young children and young adults, you know what I mean? Because I think it's very, very important that
That's heavy.
That they get involved in this, for sure.
Yeah, that's heavy. All right, we got to run the break, but when we come back, we're going to announce the winner of the contest that we had earlier, and give away some art supplies. More with Kings with Kosine right here on Fox Soul.
Spending time outdoors has never felt more valuable. Whether it's exploring nature or relaxing in your yard, let's do it responsibly. Before going out, check for closures and fire restrictions. Practice social distancing, even when outside and on the trail. Back at home, if burning yard debris, keep your pile small. And no matter where you are, be sure to properly extinguish any outdoor fire. Drown, stir, drown, feel. We're all in this together. Help keep our safe places safe.
Anytime they're playing music downstairs, it's loud. I go downstairs, see what they doing, see what music they doing, see what they dancing to. I go play piano downstairs, they come get involved. Leah has a drum set beside it, banging that. Any music, that's what they do.
Here's to the things that can keep us safe. Those we use all the time with hardly a thought. Those that are silently standing by to save our lives. And now, those that we carry with us everywhere we go. Many mobile devices will now bring you wireless emergency alerts, real-time information directly from local sources you know and trust. With the unique sound and vibration, you'll be in the know wherever you are.
Tonight we're having our pajama party, and some of us don't look like we're quite in pajamas.
Fox Soul presents Chatter.
She happens to be in green. I didn't want to say her name. And then the other one has on jean pajamas.
This is a onesie.
5 women of faith, keeping it real.
Dr. Jewel,
She's a company.
you're a little naked for the sake.
Every Thursday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific.
You're trying to get our ratings up.
Stream it live.
I like sunshine and rain.
Welcome back to KINGZ with Kosine right here on Fox Soul. Grant Hill and I just started a production crew together over that last break. So we'll be coming at you real soon. Fellas, I'm running out of time. I just want to real quick, like 30 seconds or less, just going around the table real quick, just closing thoughts on art and culture today. George, what you got?
Gosh.
I'll put you on the spot.
You know what? There's an app called Live Auction Art that I use to research almost any artist and what their prices are, and it's free on iTunes Music. Or on the App Store rather. And you can download it and you can literally type in, Hank Willis Thomas and just see what his secondary market activity is. And it's a great way of kind of taking away some of the art market's not very transparent, but things like this app do kind of democratize the information. So you can kind of get familiar with price points and at least get a baseline for which to start doing research around galleries and museums. The last thing I say is don't spend your last dollar on a piece of art or expect to flip it. You have to be very patient. Obviously, the returns are there, but don't do it just to make a financial return, because I don't think it really works out that way.
Yeah, that's how I do my shoes. I don't buy shoes to flip them. I wear my joints. I wear them. Brother Hank, closing thoughts.
Oh, it's just been really great to be here to share the time and the knowledge and the wisdom. I think rare opportunities. I've been in conversation with Grant in many ways for a long time, and our first conversation comes through the virtual, so really grateful to that. And George, nice to see you again. Knowledge, nice to see you, Kosine. I can't wait to be in the studio with you, reminiscing.
Yes, sir.
With everyone. My new word is I hope to share air with you.
There it is. There it is. Knowledge.
Just in closing, man, I just want to shout out all the creatives, who actually tuned in to learn, because I think that's, a huge part of the process of growing. You know what I mean? Constantly, acquiring more information, more knowledge that can help you expand not only your creative thoughts, but actually the way in which you go about actualizing, bringing these things to fruition. And just a message to a lot of the creatives, man. Like, we definitely in some trying times right now. Keep your overhead low. You know what I mean? So you can keep your creativity high. So that's just my words of wisdom to them.
There it is, brother Hall of Famer, Duke Blue Devils.
Yeah, no, just first of all, Kosine, I appreciate you giving us the platform to have, this very stimulating conversation. I know I've enjoyed hearing from the others, learning from the others, sharing, exchanging ideas, thought processes, approaches to the creative process. And to all those at home, just I think ultimately, whether you're a creator, a collector, a would-be collector, I think it's a wonderful experience to be a part of the art community, and I think it's edifying, it's inspiring, it's moving, and I thank everybody for staying on and listening and letting us all be a part of this wonderful discussion.
There it is. There it is. I appreciate all you brothers again. For my special announcement, my team and I have partnered with the George Wells to do a matching art supplies donation to one of my Instagram followers, and the winner is that's a drum roll right there, Sub-Zero Beats. We got to put our money where our mouth is for the kids. Thanks, George, for helping us with the next generation. And that's it for this week. Until next week, I wish you light and peace. Stay tuned for the Mike and Donnie show right here on Fox Soul. Thank you again, brothers.
Thank you.